Today we are going to talk about world's most scariest places, though for all of us world's most scariest place is the examination hall, but still there are some more scary places, and in this video you will find a list of 9 of the most scariest places on Earth, some of which you will most likely have heard of, and some of which you may have not. What is for sure though, is that you'll likely want to read some of these creepy stories with the lights on. Built in 1829, Eastern State Penitentiary is a former prison in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. It's known for being the very first prison of its kind to introduce solitary confinement. Prisoners would be completely isolated, living alone, eating alone, in their own individual yards. Whenever an inmate left his cell, a black hood would be placed over his head to assure he remained in confinement. Due to harsh approach, many prisoners were driven to insanity, and as a result, the system was scrapped in 1913. From then until 1970 it was used as a regular prison. Reports of the paranormal have been going on since the 1940s, but ever since the Stone Prison was abandoned in 1971, paranormal experiences have seemingly increased. Reports include shadowy figures that seem to quickly turn away when approached, a dark figure that is occasionally seen in the guard tower, and evil cackling is heard coming from cell block 12. Shadowy figures have been seen sliding down walls in cell block 6. The next is Waverly Hills, which was originally a 2-story wooden building that was opened in 1910, however, the building you see today was constructed in 1926. It served as a tuberculosis hospital throughout the early to mid-20th century, a time when the disease was at its worst. It is believed that as many as 63,000 patients died there. The death toll, as well as the supposed mistreatment and questionable experimental procedures on patients, are all recipes that may be behind one of the most haunted buildings in the whole of the US. This has thrown up some incredible evidence over the years, as more and more people are given permission to investigate. Taps captured a figure on their thermal imaging camera that seemed to be walking across the hall. The figure was about 3 feet tall. They later found out that the ghost of a young boy named Tim has been spotted there before. There are vast amounts of varying reports, including full-bodied apparitions, fleeting shadows, screams from empty rooms, sudden cold spots, among many others. The next is the historic Monte Cristo homestead in Junee, New South Wales, is regarded as the most haunted location in Australia. Its reputation is believed to stem from a number of tragic events that have occurred there since it was built in 1885. From the time of its construction up to 1948, the Crawley family owned and resided in the property. During this time the family laid witness to many deaths, including the tragic death of a young child who was dropped down the stairs. A maid to the family is believed to have fallen from the balcony, and a stable boy apparently burned to death on the property. There was also a mentally ill man named Harold, the son of a caretaker, who was chained up in the caretaker's cottage for 40 years. He was found curled up next to the body of his dead mother and sent to a mental institute where he died shortly after. The Castle of Good Hope in Cape Town, South Africa, was built in the 17th century by the Dutch East India Company. It's the country's oldest colonial building. One of the most famous haunting is the Lady in Grey. She has been witnessed running through the castle holding her face and crying hysterically. However, since a woman's body was found during recent excavations, her ghost hasn't been reported. Sometime in the 1700s, a soldier was found hanging from the bell rope in the bell tower, which overlooks the entrance to the castle. After his death, the bell tower was sealed off, however, to this day the bell has been known to strike off its own accord. There's also the ghost of a black dog who has been known to pounce on unsuspecting visitors, then simply vanish into thin air. The next is, the ancient Ram in Buet in 1145 is believed to be the most haunted house in the entire British Isles, and perhaps the most haunted house in the world. The tales of child sacrifices, devil worship, and evil spirits are believed to be behind the terrifying happenings in this building. The inn was built on the intersection of 2 ley lines, what many people believe is a conductor for spiritual activity. In addition, An ancient pagan burial ground is said to have resided in the property over 5,000 years ago. During its time as a bed and breakfast, people would often flee in the middle of the night, often seeing full-bodied apparitions in their rooms, the feeling of being touched, pulled, disembodied voices, and just a general feeling of evil. John, the current owner, and resident of the Ram Inn, has reported that on his first night in the house in 1968, he felt a presence grab his arm, before being dragged out of bed and across the room. John has since found evidence of devil worship and ritual sacrifice. He found 2 child skeletons underneath the staircase, as well as broken daggers. He continues to experience the hauntings and the attacks to this day. The next is Borgvattnet, which is a small village in Jämtland County, northern Sweden. It's renowned for having one of the most haunted houses in Sweden, the Old Vicarage, which was built in 1876. The first ghost ever documented at the vicarage came in 1927 when the chaplain Nils Hedlund resided. He reported he was on his way up to the attic to gather his laundry when he witnessed his laundry being torn down from the line by an unseen force. Rudolf Tangden, a priest who lived at the vicarage during the 1930s, saw an old woman dressed in gray appear in a room. He followed her as she walked away, but she vanished in front of his eyes. In 1945 the chaplain, Eric Lindgren, moved into the vicarage, and he began a journal recounting many of his own experiences in the house. He reported being thrown out of his chair regularly by an unseen force. The current building is serving as a restaurant, cafe, as well as a guest house. If you dare to stay the entire night, you'll receive an overnight stay certificate to prove it. Now a museum. The ghost of World War II German soldiers have been seen in uniform. Lights are known to turn on and off by themselves and voices are heard in the basement. German commands are often heard being shouted out in the middle of the night, and disembodied footsteps are a common experience. Soldiers who have visited the museum and picked up a telephone have reported hearing a woman talking backward. It's not clear whether it's in English or German. In the town of Babenhausen, a witch was allegedly burned at the stake sometime in the 19th century. Her ghost is said to have seduced and killed several German soldiers. The next is, Island La Isla de la Muñecas, the Island of the Dolls, is certainly one of the strangest haunted locations in our list. In the 1950s, a man named Julian Santabarrera moved to the island, despite being married with a young family. Julian was unaware of the dark history of the area when he moved there to become a recluse. Legend says that 3 young girls were playing near the water in the 1920s when one of the girls fell in and drowned in the murky waters. Locals believe that ever since her death, the young girl's spirit has been unable to leave the island. It soon grew quite the reputation as a haunted place, and locals wouldn't go near it at night for fear of what they may see. Julian claimed that as soon as he moved on the island, a little girl began speaking to him. The girl told Julian how she had died, and that she was trapped on the island. He began to get the dolls for this little girl, often selling off fruit and vegetables that he had grown on the island so that he could buy old dolls for her to play with. Julian later told his nephew that it was becoming more difficult to appease the young girl's thirst for these dolls, with him seemingly worried that she wanted him to join her in her watery grave. The same day he had this discussion, his nephew was returning to the island when he found his uncle face down in the canal. His body was in the same spot where the little girl had apparently drowned 70 years before. Today, tourists to the island often speak of the doll's eyes following them. Others have also reported that the mutilated dolls whisper to them, especially at night. Julian's ghost is also said to remain on the island, as well as the young girls. The next is Edinburgh Castle, which has a history dating back to the Iron Age. Situated overlooking what many people believe to be the most haunted city on earth, Edinburgh Castle has been the site of torture and many bloody battles during its time. Recipes for many a haunted location. Visitors and staff of this now tourist destination have experienced many things over the years. The most common is the feeling of being touched and pulled, as well as the sighting of apparitions. Spirits that have been witnessed include an old man wearing an apron, a headless drummer boy, and a piper who mysteriously lost his life after getting lost in the tunnels below the castle.